Hello everyone, good evening. I'm going to give you a few moments to come online, as I know that you're being notified at the moment about the live that is going live right now. This evening we are talking about not non-verbal communication, non-violent communication. Let me just move the camera a bit so you can see a bit more of the plant. Lovely. So yes, non-violent communication is what we're talking about this evening. And the reason that this sort of came back into focus actually was the post that I started doing last week on the second plane of childhood according to Dr. Montessori, as described by Dr. Montessori. And the second plane of development is between 6 and 12. And Dr. Montessori referred to this plane as the age of rudeness, when children are very articulate and they have a very strong sense of what's right and what's wrong. And obviously, as the children, quite naturally, what their idea of right and wrong is, or what their idea of what is fair, what we're saying is fair, and what they think is fair does not match. There's a mismatch there. So when they speak to us, when they respond to us, it can seem pretty rude. So hence why it's called the age of rudeness. And anyway, I was speaking to a fellow Montessori colleague about this this week, and my experience with Olivia, my daughter, who will turn 6 in December. And we were speaking about that, and and then we sort of got onto the topic of non-violent communication, and it reminded me that my path with non-violent communication actually started in South Africa. I was at an interview, it was 2012, and it was an interview at a Montessori school in Paarl, which is in the Western Cape, sort of inland in the Western Cape, and not too far from Cape Town. And I was sitting in the office waiting for my meeting, waiting for my interview, and to the left of me there was a pinboard, and it said, it had 3 lists of words for non-violent communication. And at that stage, I didn't know what non-violent communication was. I remember it was printed on blue paper, and it was typed. And the non-violent communication words, it was three columns. And one was descriptive words to say how you feel. One was, hi Kate, hi Secret Rab, hi Glambox. And it was 3 different columns of different descriptive words that you can use to say how you're feeling, to say, state objectively what you're feeling, to see what can be changed, things like that. And I remember reading it thinking, wow, non-violent communication, what's that? And then speaking to the principal about it at this school. I didn't end up working there in the end. And so I came to reading this book. I know it's back to front for you, but it's called Non-Violent Communication, A Language of Life. And that's by Marshall B. Rosenberg. I'm going to put it on my stories later, with some other resources that we're going to talk about this evening. But I really recommend this book. He's also done one for children, which is called Raising Children Compassionately, Nonviolent Communication. So it's really amazing. It's incredibly insightful. He talks a lot about where it's been used in the world, in war zones, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for example. It's been used in South Africa, healing from the scars of apartheid. It's been used in so many situations all over the world. It's absolutely incredible. And so that's how I came to nonviolent communication. And I was reminded of it this week because of the stage I am with my daughter Olivia, and this conversation I had with a fellow Montessorian. And so many people have asked for it, and I said, how do we really communicate when children are little? It's very sort of straightforward, isn't it, that our language, and with Piccolini it's very easy actually to once you get the hang of it, it's easy to understand what their needs are, and it's easy to understand why they get frustrated, because the verbal skills aren't there. And then we can find it gets a little bit trickier, because once the verbal skills are there, and then different developmental stages come in, like, for example, in the 6 to 9 age group, because they want to be part of a social group, they'll exclude others, and they're finding their place in society. So that sort of edge of behaviour of you're not my friend, I won't play with you, that sort of comes in around 5, 6, 7, which is all completely normal. But it calls upon us to give different responses, to think about how we are responding compassionately to our children, so they can learn, they can role model how to respond compassionately. So that was my introduction and very verbose. What is non-violent communication? Non-violent communication, as it says on the front of the book, is a language of life, and it's can be also called giraffe language. As I said in my post, giraffes are the land animals with the largest heart. So for children, we can call upon them to express themselves with their giraffe heart, for example, something like that. And it's also called, non-violent communication is also called compassionate communication. And what it is essentially is a powerful process of communication, I'm going to read from my notes, that focuses on feelings and needs rather than what the other person has done wrong in our eyes. So I'll just repeat that. So it focuses on our feelings and our needs rather than what the other person has done wrong in our view. And this can be really challenging because so much of society, so much of how we were parented a generation ago was we behave in a certain way in order to get acceptance, in order to get praise, in order to get a good job or good grades or what have you, whatever it is. Almost all of Western society previously was arranged in such a way that it's the carrot and stick approach. And we see that the carrot and stick approach doesn't work at all long term. Nothing in history, in history, how many centuries, how many thousands of years of human history do we have, human civilization? And we have seen that nothing ever worthwhile is learnt from when teaching it by force, when teaching it from shame, when teaching it from praise and reward, from teaching it from guilt, from teaching it from fear. So we know that the carrot and stick approach doesn't work. And Dr. Montessori saw this over 100 years ago, and this is why she implemented it into her classrooms, into her very first classroom in the slums of Rome in 1903. And this is what people sort of slowly, in Montessori classrooms, this type of non-violent communication, even though there's no link between Montessori and Marshall D. Rosenberg, other than that what they're saying is essentially the same thing. Dr. Montessori said it a century ago, and Marshall D. Rosenberg has been saying it in the past 20, 30, 40 years. It's all about connection. It's we call upon the best version of ourselves. We call upon the best version of our children so that we can connect, so that we can empathize, so that we can have compassion, because that's actually what builds peaceful societies, a harmonious world. That's how we can effect massive social change, because we are speaking compassionately to ourselves, and the transformation comes particularly as a parent, and it feels like as a parent this was so much more accessible to me than it was before I was a parent, because I guess I have so much more compassion since being a parent, because we've all had the sleepless nights, we've all had the I don't know what to do situations, we've all had the what is wrong situation, we've all had the panicky situation, because we are parents and it's actually really, really hard sometimes. So the place of compassion for me that I managed to access within myself from being a parent, and then that gave me the key to unlock non-violent communication, even though I was already practicing it in the Montessori classroom before. But being a parent and understanding it gave a whole new level of understanding, because children, especially little children, are irrational and illogical because their brains aren't yet developed. So we have to find this space in between where we can be still compassionate and we can be loving and we can connect rather than disconnect, even when our children are the most unlovable, the most badly behaved, the most embarrassing, whatever it might be. And that's what nonviolent communication is all about. It's a process of connecting deeply with ourselves and connecting deeply with others. Hi, Diana. So where do we start? I've written 6 pages of notes on my pinboard, 6 pages of bullet points, and I've got so much to say. And those of you, all of you who've been here know that I really do waffle sometimes and go down a rabbit hole. So don't hesitate. Kate, you're good at keeping me on track. Don't hesitate to keep me on track if I'm waffling. And do jump in if you have questions as well, okay? So what does nonviolent communication with children really mean? It means focusing on our connection with our children. It's actually an extension. It's really useful to think of it as an extension of attachment parenting. If you're familiar with anything about attachment parenting, it's really all about forging this connection with our children in infancy, knowing that the most primal needs, the most basic needs of connection need to be met in infancy. And what nonviolent communication does is it takes it further. It acknowledges that the basic primal need for human connection, for understanding, for compassion doesn't stop when your baby starts walking as a piccolini. Actually, that continues through piccolini, preschooler, all throughout childhood, all throughout adolescence, and all throughout adulthood. So instead of focusing on discipline and authority and essentially controlling our children, this turns it on its head and says connected people, connected children are more readily able to accept our guidance, to accept our advice, to accept our boundaries when we are deeply, deeply connected to them. So they, someone said this to me the other day, you know, we're on their team. They need to know we're on their team. If we are the people who are criticizing them or mocking them or just laying down discipline the whole time, that's not going to work as a long-term strategy. It may or may not be effective in the short term, depending on how willful your child is. Hopefully your child is going to push back if you're trying to just exert authority over them. But they might not, and they might just become passive instead. What this is about is connecting deeply so that their desire to connect with us, we have such a strong connection with them that we don't need the discipline and we don't need the authority. We need loving boundaries for sure, but loving boundaries comes from a place of connection. It comes from a place of open conversation. It comes from a place of open dialogue. So that's what we're really trying to achieve. Connection instead of discipline, and that's how it works. Excuse me, I'll just have a drink of water. And so let's give one example. This is an example that Marshall D. Rosenberg gives in one of his seminars. It's 2 questions to ask ourselves. So imagine that, yes, Kate, yeah, it's very true. It's very true, and it's really hard to do as well, actually, isn't it? Because we want to give unconditional love. But most likely, we were role modeled conditional love by our parents just because of the generation. This isn't about knocking our parents. Everyone did the best that they could at that time. But there's a higher level of universal consciousness in the world now. And we now understand so more just from neuroscience and from the spiritual consciousness side about what children really need, what human connection we really need. Yes, exactly. We approve or disapprove of the action, but we still love them. And also, it's very clear that we can disapprove, we can state our disapproval, but it doesn't need to be a whole energetic weirdness about stating our disapproval. Do you know what I mean? I can't allow you to do that. I can't allow you to hit the cat or whatever. You know, it's just a very clear statement, a very clear observation. You know, if we say, oh, you're being so rough again, you're being so unkind, this whole great big lecture about how bad the child is, that doesn't actually teach anything. Just a very clear boundary of, I can't let you hit the cat, I'm going to stop, or I'm going to block you, or I'm going to hold your hand, or whatever it is. That's very, very different to actually than going on a character assassination because they've hit the cat, because that's unfortunately what Piccolini and preschoolers do. That's where I am at the moment with my smallest one. So the 2 questions that Marshall D. Rosenberg said is, when we're in a power struggle, when we're in a situation with our child where they are doing something we don't want them to do, or let's give an example, actually. Let's give an example. Imagine, it's come to the end of the day and you want your child to, your house is a complete mess, as it will be because you have young children, or maybe you've got older children, maybe you've got teenage children, but your house is a mess and you are frazzled and you're burnt out and you're really, really annoyed. We could go on a lecture about how they never help, and we could go on a lecture about, oh, I'm so fed up of this and da 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 da. Or we could ask ourselves two questions. And the first question is, what do we actually want our child to do in this moment? And the second question is, and what do we want our child's reasons to be for doing this? So for example, tidying the room. What do we want our child to do? We want them to clear up their toys. So there's toys and there's clothes and everything, all the fun of the day is strewn everywhere in the sitting room and every room in the house. And even in a small 2-bedroom apartment that I have, it's still like, it's still pandemonium. That's what we want them to do. We want them to tidy up, essentially. And the second question, what are the reasons, what do I want the child's reasons to be for doing this? I don't want them to be doing this because they fear me. I don't want them to be doing it out of shame because I've told them how untidy and unhelpful they are. I don't want them to be doing it out of guilt because I've said, Mummy's so tired, I've been looking after you all day, you're so ungrateful. And I don't want them to be doing it for a reward, as in, if you tidy up now and I'll give you some chocolate afterwards. So we don't want them to be doing it for any other reason other than they're a contributing member of the community. And some days this is going to look different than others. So let's give the example of cleaning up at the end of the day, or cleaning up when there's a mess. So the things to do are to, there's 4 stages. 1 is to observe what's going on. 2 is to state your feeling. 3 is to make a suggestion. And 4 is to, and the third one is to make a suggestion of what can be done to remedy it. So for example, the example of tidying up the environment, tidying up the home when there's toys everywhere. I could say, I feel really frustrated because I like things to be in order in our home. So I'm not saying I feel really frustrated because you've made a mess. I'm not really saying that I feel really frustrated because I'm so exhausted and blah, 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 blah. I'm just saying I feel frustrated because I like things to be in order. This is important because I am owning what my unmet needs are in this situation. I am taking responsibility for saying, basically, I feel upset with this mess, but I know it's my issue. So that's the first thing, is to observe what's going on and acknowledge the feeling that you are having, not how someone else has made you feel, just the feeling that you're having. Then you could say, would you be willing to put your things back where they belong? And of course, your answer to this from the child could be yes or no, or ignore you, or what have you. However, we've got to trust that when they are ready, they will do it in their own time because of the connection that we have with them. So the question is, would you be willing to ... place your things back where you belong and where they belong? And then you could say, and I'm going to do this. And that's what I do with the children, actually. I'll say, would you be willing to do this and do that? And then, and I've talked about this in an Instagram live before, we all know we're going to end up doing the clearing up anyway, hey? So there's no point us doing it when we're angry. There's no point us getting frustrated about it. It's seeking to engage our children in a way that's really empowering for them and uplifting for them and connects with them compassionately. Because if they turn around and say, no, I don't want to, and you say, yes, Kate, exactly right, yeah. And this does is it gives them an opportunity to say no, actually. And Olivia does quite often to me. She'll say, I mean, Harry always resets everything if I ask him, but just because he's 3.5 and he's in that stage where he really, really wants to. Now Olivia's closer to 6, she's not as interested in. But if I say, oh, would you be willing to put your clothes back where they belong, put the books back where they belong? If she says no, then there'll be a reason. She'll be like, oh, I'm feeling really tired, or I just want to go and wash my hands and have supper, or what have you. And I have to contain my ego to say, okay, that's fine, because I know and I trust that some days she's not going to want to, but some days she will, and some days she'll reset the whole environment, and then she'll make tea as well. Do you know what I mean? It's being able to let go of when, as you said, Kate, in your comment earlier on, let go of when they're not being the best version of themselves. We can call upon the best version of them, but we can't force it. We can't force it. And I said at the beginning, nothing ever good has been produced in the history of human civilization by forcing someone to do something. So those are the steps, and then you're maybe with an older child, like from the age of 4 onwards, you could say then the next step after that is, as long as everyone's calm, is you could say, I'd really like us to have a discussion where we can meet your needs for play and having your play in different rooms, and we can meet my needs for order. So that would be a really nice conversation to have, because also children are amazing at problem solving, and this is another branch of this actually, in talking about problem solving and conflict resolution between them, particularly between siblings. So it's really like giving them that gift, like trusting them that they're going to find a solution. So can we have a discussion about meeting your needs for play in every room and my needs for order, and then see where that conversation leads us. Of course, there's triggers that we're going to have about different things that happen, our children's rudeness or their messiness or what have you, and that's all part of being the human experience. And we know that whatever is triggering us is nothing to do with our child. Our child is just behaving in a normal childlike way. Our trigger is most likely from something from our early childhood, from our conditioning, and that's not to shame anybody or and when we get angry, we're not angry at them, we're angry at ourselves, and it's something probably very, very deep seated, really deep inside us. We're not even aware of these triggers, and it's normal. It's all part of the human experience, and it's just starting to notice when we do feel that the conversation's going to steer off in a way. We can feel, I can feel myself getting angry about this, and I don't need to. And that's when we can call upon these skills that we're learning, the skill of observing, saying what you're seeing. I'm feeling really frazzled. I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm feeling, what was another one? Despondent. And the language that we use in nonviolent communication is very descriptive adjectives to say how we're feeling. I do cringe sometimes when I hear people saying, you made mummy feel sad, or you made mummy feel happy, or something like that, because there's such a range of human emotion, isn't there? Not everything is black and white, not everything is good or bad, not everything is happy or sad. There are a myriad, a kaleidoscope of emotions, a kaleidoscope of feelings we can feel from one moment to the next. But what we can really do if we are expressing ourselves to our children is we can give them this gift of rich language at the same time, of frazzled or harassed or frustrated or stressed or what have you, all of these words that we give them to express how we're feeling inside. And actually what I like to do with my children is, and this isn't necessarily part of nonviolent communication, is really express this feeling in the body. Where do I feel that? And so it's not just giving a name to it with the disconnect between the mind and the body. We've got to really help children connect with their feelings. I was talking to Olivia and Harry about an incident that had happened, and they were being unkind to each other. And I said I asked Olivia how she thought Harry was feeling when she said those words to her. What would he have felt in his body? What do you think he felt in his body? And then I said after that, what would you feel in your body if someone said those unkind words, and where would you feel it in your body? So things like this is just really deeply, it cultivates compassion, and it helps us to feel really, really deeply into ourselves, and our children to feel deeply into ourselves, so that we can listen to our body's messages, so that we can learn to trust our bodies, so that our bodies become a place of safety for us, because our bodies always speak the truth, but we sometimes don't know how to listen to the messages. But if we can do this from a very, very young age, of expressing what our feelings are, saying where our feelings are in our body, inviting them to feel where they feel their feelings in the body, the positive feelings and the negative feelings. And we had it this morning when Olivia was on the swing with Harry and Olivia were on the swing with a friend, and Harry went too high. And he started, when you go really high, this sort of jolt. And then he was like, oh, stop, I feel scared. And then we talked through that he felt really, really scared in his tummy. It didn't feel good in his tummy and his heart because he'd gone too high and he thought he was going to fall off. So it's just little things like this that kind of come into everyday conversation, where it's getting in touch with really, really how they're feeling deep inside, and then being able to express that in ways that are descriptive with this rich language, not with just, happy or sad or angry or what have you. It's a huge range of vocabulary that we have in the English language, or whatever is your mother tongue that you're speaking with your children at home, and as I said, having the list of words can be really, really helpful. And what I'll do is I'll source them. I think there's some in this book, and I'll put them on a series of posts as well, so you can always see, and we can look at these different types of words we can use to express feelings, which is broader than the happy or sad or the angry or what have you, or joyful. So excuse me, I'll just have a sip of water. So non-violent communication at its core is a way of us being seen and heard. And this is one of the basic human needs. These are two of the basic human needs: feeling seen and feeling heard. And non-violent communication gives us this opportunity, this gift to see, as I said at the beginning, ourselves more compassionately, and our children more compassionately, and others more compassionately as well. So it's really uplifting our children, uplifting ourselves, and that's what affects social change. That's what affects a more peaceful world. I'd like to go through the steps of how you can practice it a bit more. So what shall I start with? So I've got here things for us to know. We're not always right with our children, just because we're bigger or older or have more life experience, that doesn't mean that we're always right. We do get it wrong. So when we do get it wrong, we just have to be really open-hearted and humble, and have the humility to say, I said the wrong thing there, or I made a mistake, or whatever it is. Or, it's also okay to change your mind. If you think that you're dead set on something and then you realize that you're being really dogmatic about it for not actually a particular reason, or you think you're being controlling, then it's okay to say, actually, I don't think I got that right. Let's try this instead. It's okay to change our minds as well. And that actually makes us, because we're vulnerable and because we're humble and we're showing that we're human, that actually, again, builds this trust and builds this connection with our children. The second step for us to know is that a child's expression of their feelings, whether they're 2 years old or whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 17 years old, it is an expression of how they feel. It is valid, whether we like it or not, whether it's pretty or not. As you said, Kate, earlier on, it may not be what we want to hear, but it's our responsibility to hear them, and we're not going to get it right all the time. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's really very much about knowing that their feelings are valid, and 99% of expressing feelings, the value comes from actually expressing them and someone hearing them without them trying to be changed, without them being invalidated, like, it wasn't like that, or didn't do that, or what have you. That's what the whole point of expressing feelings is, just to get it out. And if we can receive that, whether it's a 2-year-old having an outburst, a tantrum, or a teenager having a tantrum, how they feel is how they feel. It's not a reflection on us, unless we make it a reflection of us. We have to be able to stand in our power to receive it compassionately, and know that this is part of their process, and to know that if we try and repress our child's tantrums, whether they're a teenager or whether they're a 2-year-old, if we try to tell them that they're okay when they're not, when they've fallen off their bike or whatever, if we try and tell them that, if we try and deceive them by pretending everything's fine when it's not, all that happens is that these feelings get repressed. If they don't express them out loud, then they go internally into the body. feelings, big feelings, strong feelings need to be expressed so that they can come out of the body. Otherwise they hang and they stay in the body, and then over time, years and then decades, they become really, really toxic inside the body. So we've got to support them in getting these feelings out. And as I said, it might not be what we want to hear. They might be completely unreasonable and illogical, but we have to allow them to express it, because we don't want them being stuck in their bodies, because it's going to come out as anything repressed will come out as anger later, in later life. And I speak actually with quite a lot of vulnerability about this, because anger is something that I've really, really struggled with in the past 10 years, about 10 years. And it's really difficult, because there's so much shame associated with it. There's so much shame around it, about losing your temper. And now I carry a lot less shame about it, because I know it was just things that were repressed from before. It's neither good or bad, it's just what it is. And it's much better for me now to acknowledge that, and then to release it in all the ways that I find healthy for me, like journaling and yoga and breath work and all of those things, and dance and going on a trampoline and swimming in the sea and all of those things that work for me. But there's anything that's repressed will need to come out. So it's much better that a 2-year-old has a tantrum about something that isn't going their way than me, like a 43-year-old, having uncontrollable anger. Do you know what I mean? It's so much healthier if we can deal with it, allow it to be processed and literally move through the body, and then it doesn't hold on. Otherwise it's really we're really, really holding on to this in our bodies, and then it causes health problems later on. So as I say, just allow everything to be expressed, whether you like it or not. You can draw boundaries around what you will tolerate in terms of abusive language, for example, or if your child is hitting you, you draw a boundary around that for sure. I can't let you hit me. I'm going to hold your hands, or I'm going to block your hands. I can't let you hit me. I'm going to walk away, or whatever it is, whatever you need. I can see you're really angry. I won't let you speak to me like that. And then, that's for a teenager, for example. So you're going to walk away. You state your boundary, but we don't need to be angry about it. We don't need to tell them to stop expressing what they're expressing. We can say what feels right for us, but we don't need to stop their expression of their feelings. So it's a really fine line, actually. So point 3 is when we get to the stage where we're going to then communicate to our child, it's communicating with them without judgment. So going back to the scenario we had about the messy room, you can say factually, as if you're, doing the voiceover for a documentary, I can see lots of toys and clothes on the floor, or I can see that there's been a spill of water on the floor that needs to be wiped up. So really state things without judgment, rather than walking in the room and going, this is a terrible mess, or something like that. Even if it might be funny, for example, even if it might be a family joke, it's not helpful. Just saying things without judgment, it just takes the energy. It doesn't take much with children, and the parent-child dynamic is so intense. It doesn't take much to just, like, literally one little crank of the volume knob, and then it gets out of control, and then everyone's having a tantrum, and you're triggering and responding to each other. So actually, if we can say things without judgment as much as possible, that's just going to help and enrich us so much more. So yes, as I said before, stating your feeling. I feel frazzled, and what do you actually need? I need help. I'm feeling frazzled. I need help. Would you be willing to wash your hands and lay the table so we can all sit down to have supper at the same time, for example? And they're going to say yes or no, and they're going to drag the heels or not. And actually, I've got a really, really good example of this, of how I did it this evening. With this exact scenario happened with Harry this evening. So Harry doesn't often like coming to the table for meal times at the same time as everyone else. He will just, his process is that he likes to play for sort of 5-10 minutes and then come. And he eats very, very well. There's no issue about his eating or anything. It's just that his thing, he likes to, for some reason, play on his own before he comes to the table, and particularly the evening meal. And this evening, and time was getting on, and I could tell that he was really tired. So that was one of the reasons he was resisting. Sorry, the kitten's biting me. We've got this rescue kitten who's very, very cute, but can you see how much she bites me? She's really vicious. I might have to put her outside. She's just really bitten me. So yeah, with Harry this evening, he was, I could tell he was getting tired, and I knew that was the reason he wasn't coming to the table. And it was sort of starting to, he's getting upset, and my tone of voice is switching to the annoyed tone. I'm sure you know what I mean. It's 5:30 in the evening, and everyone's feeling tired. And actually, this was closer to 6 o'clock. And so I just thought, what actually can I say, which is really, really honest? And so I said, Harry, I'd really like you to come to the table now. I feel worried, because if you don't eat your supper now, then I worry that you're going to feel hungry in the night, and then you won't sleep very well. And he just looked at me, and he didn't say anything for a few minutes. And then 2 minutes later, he went and washed his hands and came to the table. And I was like, wow, I wouldn't have asked him like the 20 times before to come to the table if I had said the reason that I wanted him to come then. So yeah, it was really, really simple. Saying something really, really simple. And say, for example, siblings are fighting, and they're not respecting each other's body boundaries. You don't want to fix the scenario for them, and I know we've spoken about this before. You don't want to fix the scenario before for them, but you can sort of do a freeze and do a stop, and you can say, I feel anxious because I worry that one of you is going to get hurt when you're fighting like this and you're not respecting each other's boundaries. And then you can give it back to them as a gift, as the problem solving, as what can you do to resolve this? I can see you both want this toy or whatever it is at the same time. What can you do to resolve this? And that's so much more powerful than either resolving or just shouting, stop fighting, because that's never going to work, is it? Shouting, stop fighting. It's like shouting, stop shouting, or shouting, stop being so noisy to your children. Never works. And I've done it as well, so don't worry. But it doesn't work. It never ever works, does it? So it's just really giving them clear, acknowledging what's going on and giving them clear direction on what your needs are, what needs to happen. Often just being really honest, and it's just not being punitive. I wasn't saying to Harry, if you don't eat now, you can't have any supper, and then if you're hungry in the night, then I'm not going to give you anything to eat. It wasn't about that at all. It was just a human to human. I hope a human to human connection is, I don't want you to feel hungry in the night and have a disturbed sleep, so please come to the table now. Would you be willing to come to the table now to have supper? And then it sort of dissolved, and it was absolutely fine after that. But so that was the fourth stage? Yeah. We've done that. Oh, the list of words to describe your feelings. So there's 3 different list of words that I'm going to share with you. So it's your feelings, your needs as the parent, and then your unmet needs, how you're feeling when your needs aren't met. Where do I go next? Does anyone have any questions? Because I just want to go on something which is sort of an extension to nonverbal communication, and it's something that we do in the Montessori classroom, which is more about reflection when something has gone wrong, when there's been a disagreement, or when there's, rudeness or disagreement or fighting or anything like this, anything that we have used on nonviolent communication for. What we can do is use this, particularly with our older children, from the age of 5. You can call on them to have a lot more reflection in their behaviour. You can't do this with a 1, 2, 3-year-old for sure, and even for some 4-year-olds, it might be a bit too early, depending on the emotional development of each child, which is different and isn't right or wrong. It's just how it is. So from 5 onwards, 4.5, 5 onwards, you could actually start reflecting with your children on events that have happened. So as I mentioned before, it's very much looking back at the event when the emotions have gone, and it's asking the questions of, how do you think he felt in his body when that boy was unkind to him? How do you think he felt in his body when you excluded him from your game? Something like that. And this is really key in the energy that we're using. It's an opportunity for reflection, but it cannot be done with any shame, with any guilt, with any fear. It's very much an open question. And then the second stage after that, very gently, is how do you think you would feel in your body if you were excluded like that, or someone used those words towards you? So this is for older children, really, really beautiful, because it's giving them the tools that we weren't given in our generation. Our parents didn't have access to these tools. This idea of raising consciousness and raising children's consciousness and raising children compassionately was not a mainstream way of life. It's probably not a mainstream way of life now, but it certainly wasn't. It wasn't accessible to our parents' generation. And isn't it amazing that we've got the skills and the spiritual knowledge and the science and the neuroscience now that we can give our children these tools of reflection, and we can actually, and I said I talked about this before, we can call upon the best version of our children to be compassionate. And then you can also say in that scenario, if your children don't seem to be understanding that compassionate or that empathy size, and it does take a while to build empathy as well, it's not an overnight thing. This isn't just a one conversation. You could talk about how you would feel. What's really great to do actually is then talk about an experience that you had in childhood. Was there a time that you felt bullied, you felt excluded? Children love hearing stories about our childhood. And actually telling a story about our childhood in a scenario that hurt us, when someone wasn't kind to us or we excluded, whatever it was, whether it was verbal or bullying or whatever it was, that is such a beautiful and gentle lesson that can be taught. As children get older, you do need to get. We can expect more accountability from them, and when they. And this type of open conversation about how they treat others and how they would feel and things like that. This is, when you're getting to sort of 8, 9, 10-year-olds, these are really open discussion that needs to be had, because this empathy, we really, really want to grow in the younger years, so that as they come further and further away from us in terms of age, and naturally because their peer group widens and their social circle widens, our influence will be less. So we want to be really role modeling these skills very powerfully, and these skills of compassion and empathy very as early on as we can. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for joining. It'll be on the feed, so you can watch the rest. Another time. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining. So we can say things like, to older children, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to behave like that. Even though you're angry, there's a certain way that we speak to people with respect. Even though we're angry, there's a certain way that we behave to each other with respect. Things like this, it's clearing that, making that really, really clear distinction of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And these are the rules of society that we want our children to have, so that they understand as well, how society works and how we make friends and how we build connections. And that's what's really, really important as well, that they know, not only that they know how this feels in their body and to other people, but they know how society works. And this, from the age of 6 to 12, is the key time that they learn this. They learn about how society works and how justice works and moral justice works. So this is a really amazing opportunity during these years to really, really build up these skills of reflection and build up these skills of empathy. And as I said, the 4 things: we don't want to do this from guilt, we don't want to do this from fear, we don't want to do this from shame, and we don't want to do this from a place where we're offering rewards. So that's what's really, really important. Oh yes, and then the final stage of this is you can state very clearly, we don't hurt each other's feelings. Yes, we can hurt each other's feelings. We have the power to do that with our words and our actions, but we don't hurt each other's feelings. What would you do differently next time? The next time you feel this way, what would you do differently? The next time that you feel this way, what could you say that would be different? How could you look inside yourself the next time you feel sorry, the next time you feel really angry? What could you call upon from within you? And I know that this type of spiritual language can seem quite alien to use with a child, but trust me, you're using this type of language from age 4, or even younger, even when they don't have a full understanding of it. It really comes through. You know, Olivia and even Harry at his age, but just because he's the young one, have a really good understanding of what I'm talking about when I talk about calling upon the best version of themselves. They really understand that. I used that with a friend today, actually, a 6-year-old, and it was the first time he'd heard it, but he understood what I meant. You know, he's 6 years old. He knew exactly what I meant when I asked him to call upon the best version of himself. So there are things that our children can handle, and these are conversations that are all about connection. If we can keep in our focus and our heart that this is all about connection, non-violent communication, or the Montessori approach, or respectful parenting, positive parenting, we're all trying to do the same thing. Conscious parenting, spiritual parenting, we're all trying to do the same thing, because we know that connections with our children, these really strong connections, are what create this beautiful ripple effect out into our families and our communities and the wider world, to effect massive social change for a more peaceful world. And that's really a more peaceful and a more harmonious world, and a more equal world, a more just world. And that's really what this is all about, calling upon compassion for ourselves and compassion in our children and in others, so that the wars and the poverty and the things that we're seeing, the inequalities that we see in society, and the problems that we have as humans, you know, it's not a utopia to think we can move. It's not a fanciful idea of utopia that we think we can move towards a more peaceful world. You know, there are so many millions of people now actually interested. Just search for the hashtag conscious parenting in Instagram, or respectful parenting, or positive parenting, or mindful parenting, or Montessori, or any of these hashtags. You know, this is a huge movement for massive social change now, a global movement for massive social change. And if that starts with just being compassionate to ourselves and being compassionate to our children, I mean, it's so simple, but it's really beautiful, and it's really exciting to be part of this. With, you know, here in Dubai, but, you know, in the context of the Middle East, and then out into the wider world as well. So that's what we can see. That was my final point, and that was about reflection. You know, for your older children from 4, 5, 6 onwards, you can ask them for the points of reflection. You can ask them to look back on their behavior in the day that was less than they wanted it to be, and they can see what they would do differently. You know, hi Leo. What's really beautiful is actually Harry started doing this week, and it's crazy. He no one's mentioned this him before, but he got angry the other day, and then we had the point of reflection later on in the afternoon, and I said, oh, what could you do differently when you're feeling angry like that? And he said, oh, I'll just write a breathing note. And I said, oh, what's a breathing note? And he said, if anyone's feeling angry, or I'm feeling angry, I'll just go and get a note. And I've just got a big stack of Post-it notes, actually, for a different project I'm doing. So they were hanging around, and the children have been using them because they all love Post-it notes, right? And he just does it. He can't write, so he's just doing a little scribble and then giving it to people when they're upset. He said, oh, this is your breathing note. And this is for them to do breath work, to do deep breathing. And actually talking about points for reflection and calming, I've gone on for almost an hour. It's breath work I found really effective with the children. We do meditation in the evening, and we do deep breathing. But breath work that I really like is inhaling through the nose for a count of 4, retaining the breath, so holding the breath for 6, and then exhaling again through the nose for a count of 8. That is really effective in calming the nervous system, regulating the nervous system for adults and for children. And I highly recommend teaching that for ourselves when we're in a crazy moment, and for our children, because the more that they can regulate themselves, they're not going to get to that point of lashing out as often. They're not going to get to that hysteria. They're not going to get to that point where they are shouting at someone else or insulting somebody else or being rude to somebody else, because in general the nervous system isn't getting as activated as intensively. So breath work I'd really, and also just a long inhale for 4 and then a longer exhale, double the time for 8. That's also very effective as well. The 4-6-8 breathing, the inhale, retain, exhale breathing, I find really effective for me and my own practice. But you can just Google breath work actually, and there's lots of different ones you can do, and you find one that resonates for you. I had something else to say. Oh yeah, and with younger children, your reflection instead of what could you do differently, because that's not going to work with a 1, 2 and 3-year-old. Your reflection time of when things have gone wrong and your learning opportunity happens when you are going to sleep at night. And you could tell a story of, as I mentioned before, of your childhood when something like that happened and how you felt and how you dealt with it. Or you can tell a story of 2 other anonymous children, don't mention names, anonymous children who this happened to and how each of them felt in the scenario. It's a very, very gentle way of giving a message, as it were, without it being a lecture. And also doing it at night means it's going to go into their subconscious. They're going into their dreamland with a happy tale, as it were, of resolution, of a peaceful conclusion to something. And that's a really, really important, powerful message. So, nonviolent communication, I know we've covered loads and loads of things, as we always do. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I very much look forward to seeing you all again soon. On Thursday, I have got a very, very exciting Instagram Live with the wonderful Cecile at Malak, and I'm going to be talking about Montessori education, particularly Montessori with reference to babies, prenatal life and postnatal life, and how the Montessori approach can have a massive impact in positive outcomes for our tiny, 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 tiny babies, even from, in utero and then from just a few days old. So I'm so excited and honoured to be part of the Malak team for this Thursday's Insta Live, and I can't wait to see you all there. Thank you so much for joining. Bye bye. See you on Thursday.